The colony of Terranfor was a calm place on the outer rim of the Orion Reach. Its sky shimmered with soft blue light from twin suns, and the air always smelled faintly of iron and rain. Among the mix of alien races who lived there, one small human settlement stood quietly at the valley's edge. Most saw humans as harmless, friendly wanderers who built homes where others avoided. They smiled often, talked politely, and never seemed dangerous. Among them lived Don, a human engineer who worked in the colony's maintenance division. He was not tall, nor particularly strong, but there was something steady about him. His hands were rough from work, and his eyes were warm with calm patience. He fixed engines, repaired roofs, and helped with broken machines that no one else bothered to mend. When the hydro generators failed, Dan worked 3 nights without rest until the water system flowed again. When children from other races lost their learning bots, he stayed late to repair them and return them with a smile. To most people, Dan was simply a kind man. To Luma, he was her husband. Luma belonged to the Xeron species, known for their sharp minds and crystal blue skin. She was a scientist, quiet and thoughtful, working at the colony's research station. Her team studied the rare minerals beneath Terranfor's crust. Minerals that glowed faintly in the dark and stored energy more efficiently than any known element. She often joked that she was married to her lab before she married Dan, yet Dan never complained. When she came home late, he always had food ready. When she forgot her meal, he brought it to her office. When she grew frustrated, he listened. Many of her coworkers admired how peaceful their relationship seemed. "You humans are strange," said her colleague Tara once. "You work hard but still stay soft." Luma smiled at that. "Maybe that is what makes them strong," she answered. Still, sometimes she noticed something strange in Dan. When the colony reports mentioned pirate activity near the trade routes, his expression would change. His smile faded. His eyes became distant. He would grow quiet, staring out the window as if watching something far away. Luma once asked, "Are you worried about the raiders?" He shook his head lightly. "Not worried. Just remembering." Then he smiled again, and the moment passed. Life continued peacefully for many months. Luma's research gained attention from the Science Council, and Dan received praise from the maintenance department for keeping the colony running during power shortages. Together, they made a quiet, content life. They went to the night markets, shared tea under the glowing moons, and spoke about Earth, the distant home Luma had never seen. Dan told stories of forests and oceans, of old machines that roared like beasts and skies that burned with thunder. Luma listened with wonder. To her, humans were creatures of peace, who carried old beauty in their hearts. But in the shadows of space, danger was growing. The Dravix Raiders, a brutal species that lived by war, had begun to move toward the outer rim. They attacked unguarded colonies and looted entire planets. The galactic authorities warned everyone to prepare, but Terranfor was far and small. Its defense grid was weak, and no one believed the Dravix would waste time on a simple mining world. The Colony Council voted not to evacuate. The message to all citizens was clear: stay calm, stay productive, and trust the central defense system. Dan did not look calm when he heard that message. That night, while Luma worked on her reports, she heard noises from their storage room. She found Dan cleaning a small metallic box she had never seen before. Its surface was dark and smooth, marked with faint human script. When she asked what it was, he said, "Old tools." "From my training days." He closed it quickly and placed it back under the floorboard. Luma did not press him. Everyone had small secrets, she thought. Humans, especially those who left Earth, carried their past quietly. She went back to her work, unaware that the box was far from a simple toolkit. A week later, Terranfor's sky changed. It began with faint streaks of light that most thought were meteor trails. The security satellites, however, detected mass signature ships entering orbit. Within an hour, every screen in the colony displayed a single red symbol: Dravix warband approaching. Panic spread like fire. The council called for lockdown. Families ran to the underground shelters. Sirens echoed across the valley. Luma grabbed her research drives and emergency pack. She called for Dan, but he was not in the house. She searched the nearby repair bay. the generator tunnels, and finally, the cum station. When she reached the control deck, she saw the sky through the glass giant dark ships descending through the clouds, their hulls glowing with crimson energy. She tried to send a distress signal, but the network was jammed. Static filled every channel. Then, amid the noise, she heard a voice. It was faint, but familiar. "This is command to all ground units. Civilians to the shelters. Use maintenance tunnels for faster movement. Keep lights off." It was Dan's voice. Calm, clear, and commanding. Not the gentle tone she knew. This voice carried authority. It carried experience. Luma froze. The guards beside her turned, surprised. "Who gave that order?" One of them asked. That was not from Central Command. Before she could answer, an explosion rocked the colony. The power grid flickered. The guards rushed to their posts, leaving Luma alone in the chaos. She checked the cum again, replaying the short transmission. It was Dan, there was no doubt. She ran toward the lower tunnels. Smoke filled the streets, and the air burned with the sharp smell of plasma. As she reached the corridor near the shelter, she saw movement in the fog. A group of civilians ran past, followed by Dan. He was carrying the same metallic case she had seen before. His clothes were different now, dark, fitted, reinforced. He looked like someone ready for battle. "Dan," she shouted. He turned, eyes steady. "Go to the shelter," he said. His voice was low, but firm. "I will follow soon." She stepped closer, confused. "You cannot fight them, Dan. You are an engineer." He gave a small smile. "I fix what breaks. That includes our home." Then he was gone, disappearing into the smoke. Luma stood frozen. She wanted to chase after him, but the explosions grew louder, forcing her to move toward safety. Inside the shelter, people cried and whispered prayers. Luma sat near the door, clutching her datapad, trying to reach Dan again. Only silence came through. Minutes felt like hours. Outside, the colony defenses fought back, but the Draviks were relentless. Their plasma rounds tore through buildings, their ships blocking the skies. Yet something strange began to happen. The enemy ships started losing coordination. Their signals jammed, their formations scattered. The defenders reported that the Draviks' communication network was collapsing. No one knew why. Luma listened in confusion until one of the soldiers ran in, shouting, "Someone has taken over the outer defense relay. They are redirecting enemy fire. The Draviks are hitting their own fleet." The crowd gasped. "Who is controlling it?" Another asked. The soldier answered, "A human. He used an old Earth code. He is fighting them from the relay tower." Luma's heart stopped. She knew it was him. Outside, the sky flashed brighter than ever before. The Dravik ships turned against each other, confused by false signals. The ground troops retreated in disarray. The colony's turrets found their mark, blasting through the raiders' lines. Luma could only watch the chaos from the monitor near the shelter door, her hands shaking. Each time the defense system struck true, she whispered his name under her breath. Then the main screen showed the relay tower. Smoke covered it, flames rising from its base. A lone figure stood at the top, the dark case open beside him. The image was blurry, but she recognized the stance, the steady movements, the unwavering gaze. It was Dan. The battle continued for hours. The Draviks finally withdrew, leaving half their ships destroyed and the rest damaged. The colony survived, though much of it was ruined. When the all-clear signal came, Luma rushed toward the tower with the rescue team. They found burnt metal, collapsed walls, and deep craters. Near the center, they found Dan alive, but exhausted. His uniform was scorched, his hands blackened from smoke. The metal case was empty beside him. Luma ran to him and helped him stand. "What have you done?" she asked softly. He looked at her with calm eyes and said, "I did what needed to be done." She wanted to ask more, but he fainted before another word could leave his mouth. That night, as medics treated the wounded and the colony counted its losses, whispers spread among the survivors. They spoke of the human who saved them using ancient battle codes from Earth. Some said he must have been a soldier. Others said he was part of a secret human project called Galaxy Forge. A program that trained humans for survival on the harshest worlds? Luma stayed silent. She only watched Dan sleep, his chest rising slowly, his face peaceful again. She had always thought her human husband was gentle, kind, and simple. But as she looked at him now, she knew there was more beneath that calm surface, something deep, powerful, and hidden. And for the first time, she began to wonder what kind of world had shaped humanity into what they were. The next morning, Terran 4 was covered in a layer of gray dust and silence. The twin suns rose over the wrecked colony, shining on broken towers and burnt fields. Smoke curled from the ruins where homes once stood, and rescue drones moved like silent insects through the rubble. The battle was over, but its mark was deep. Luma stood outside the medical dome, watching the sun climb higher. Her eyes were tired, her hands still trembling from everything she had seen. Behind her, through the glass walls of the medical bay, she could see Dan resting on a bed. He was still pale, but alive. The doctors said his body was healing faster than expected. Though they could not explain how he had survived the explosion at the relay tower. His vital signs were strong, almost too strong for a human who had faced plasma fire. When the doctor left, Luma stepped inside quietly. Dan was awake, sitting upright, his gaze distant. He looked at her and smiled faintly. "You did not sleep," he said softly. She shook her head. "Neither did you," he chuckled, but there was weariness in it. "You worry too much, Luma." She pulled a chair closer and sat beside him. "I have reason to. You went into a battle with no armor, no weapon, and no plan I understood. And yet you took command of the defense grid like a trained officer. Who are you really, Dan?" For a moment, silence filled the room. Dan looked down at his bandaged hands. His fingers flexed slightly, as if remembering the touch of the old weapon he had used. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "You know me better than anyone here, but there are parts of my life I never wanted to open again." Luma did not press him, but her eyes showed quiet demand. He sighed and leaned back on the bed. "Before I came to Terran 4, I served in the Galaxy Forge program," he said. "It was a human project built during the old wars. We were trained to survive anywhere, on any planet. Soldiers, engineers, scientists all mixed in one. They called us builders of peace, but we were made for war." Luma felt her chest tighten. "I thought Galaxy Forge was a myth. They said it was closed a century ago." Don nodded slowly. "Officially, it was. But humans have a habit of keeping old tools ready. I left the program after the Tarkon conflict. Too many died, and too much was lost. I came here because I wanted peace. I thought I could build something instead of destroy it." Luma looked at him with new eyes. The gentleman who fixed broken machines and cooked her dinner was the same. Man who had once commanded troops and destroyed enemy fleets. She reached out and held his hand. "You could have told me," he smiled faintly. "If I had, you would have looked at me differently. I did not want to be that man again." Before she could answer, the door opened. A group of uniformed officers entered the room. Their armor carried the insignia of the Galactic Defense Authority. The leader, a tall officer with silver markings on his chest, saluted Luma briefly and then turned to Dan. "Commander Daniel Harkey," said firmly, "you are to report to Central Command for debriefing. You acted without authorization during the Dravix attack. You took control of restricted defense systems." Luma stood, shocked. "He saved the colony," she said. "Without him, everyone would be dead." The officer's face remained hard. "We are aware. That is why we need him at command immediately." Dan looked calm. "I will go," he said simply. "But she comes with me." The officer hesitated, then nodded. "She may accompany you." A few hours later, they were taken to the colony's central hub, one of the few buildings still standing. The command chamber was filled with holographic maps and transmission screens. When Dan entered, several officers stood to attention. Some looked at him with respect, others with unease. At the center table stood Admiral Corrin, a heavy-set human with a scar across his jaw. His uniform was crisp and his eyes sharp. When he saw Dan, he gave a slight smile. "I never thought I would see you again, Hark. You vanished after Tarkin. Don nodded once. I tried to stay gone. Corin gestured for him to sit. You cannot disappear from the record when you are one of the best minds the Forge ever made. What you did here was impressive. You used outdated defense systems to defeat a modern Dravex fleet. Even our current fleets struggle with that. How did you do it? Dan replied calmly, Dravex rely on signal coordination. Once I broke their link, they turned against each other. Old trick. Humans learned it the hard way centuries ago. Corin gave a slow nod. You still think like a soldier. Don looked him in the eye. I think like a human. The room grew quiet. Corin studied him for a long moment before speaking again. The Authority wants to rebuild the outer defense line. We need someone who understands both engineering and combat. I want you to lead the Terran 4 recovery project. You will have full command. Luma felt a chill. She saw the look in Dan's eyes, the same focused look he had during the battle. He needs rest, she said quickly. He cannot jump back into command after what happened. Dan gave her a reassuring look. I will be fine, Corin smiled. You always are. I handed Dan a small device. This is your command key. The Forge records show you are still listed as active reserve. Welcome back, Commander. After the meeting, Luma walked beside Dan through the quiet halls of the hub. You cannot do this again, she said. You wanted peace. He stopped and looked at her. Peace does not stay by itself. It must be protected. But you already gave enough, she whispered. Dan placed a hand on her shoulder. If I stop now, others will lose what we built. I will not let that happen again. That evening, the colony held a memorial for the fallen. Hundreds gathered in the open square, lighting small energy candles that floated into the air. The names of the dead glowed across the sky. Luma stood beside Dan as the wind carried faint ashes through the air. She watched his face as he stared at the lights. There was sorrow in his eyes, but also determination. When the ceremony ended, she finally asked the question that had been in her heart since the battle. What was in the metal case? Dan hesitated, then said quietly, A Forge core. She frowned. I do not know what that is. It is a device from the Galaxy Forge program, he explained. It connects to human neural patterns and adapts weapons, machines, even systems to our commands. It is old, unstable, but powerful. I swore never to use it again. Why did you keep it? Because I knew someday I might need to. Luma looked down at the ground. She felt a mixture of fear and admiration. You carry so much responsibility, he smiled faintly. Humans always do. It is both our curse and our strength. Over the next few days, Dan threw himself into rebuilding the colony. He directed repair teams, rewired the damaged defense grid, and organized food supplies. His leadership surprised even the officers from the Defense Authority. He worked alongside aliens of every race without arrogance, treating everyone as equals. His calm voice and steady guidance brought hope where there had been despair at night. Luma often found him standing outside their repaired home, staring at the stars. She knew he was thinking of the forge of battles long past, and of the future that awaited them. She walked up to him one night and asked, Do you miss it? The old life? He shook his head. No, but I understand it now. Humans build peace because we know how easily it can be destroyed. Their peace, however, did not last long. One morning, a signal arrived from orbit. It carried a code that none of the colony systems could decode. Dan took one look at the signal and turned pale. It is a forge encryption, he said. Luma frowned. From Earth? He shook his head slowly. No, from somewhere else. Someone who should not have this code, signal repeated, carrying a message in distorted human speech. Forge asset located. Retrieval in progress. Before Luma could speak, the sky darkened again. 3 ships entered the atmosphere. They were not Dravex. Their design was human, but older, sharper, with markings of the Galaxy Forge program. Dan's jaw tightened. They are coming for the core. Luma's pulse quickened. You destroyed it, did you not? He looked at her silently. She understood the answer. He had hidden it. Sirens rang through the colony once more. Soldiers and civilians scrambled for cover. Dan turned to Luma, his expression serious but calm. "You must go to the shelter again. I am not leaving you. It's time you must. If they take the core, they will use it for war. I will stop them." Before she could protest, he pressed his forehead against hers for a brief moment. "Trust me," he whispered. Then he ran toward the command center, his movements fast and precise, as the first of the forged ships landed outside the colony. Dan activated the defense systems. The screens lit up with red alerts. His fingers moved across the console, entering old codes faster than any computer. The defense cannons turned toward the incoming ships. Luma watched from the shelter's monitor. The people around her whispered in fear as the old human ships opened their cargo bays, revealing armored figures that looked almost like humans, but moved with mechanical precision. Don stood alone at the center of the command deck. Facing the screen that showed the attackers, his old comrades had returned, and they wanted what he had tried to forget. He knew this battle would be different. The Draviks were monsters of war, but predictable. The forged soldiers were something else. They were human perfection forged by cold design. They were like him, but without restraint. Outside, thunder filled the air as the first blasts struck the defense shields. Luma pressed her hands against the glass and whispered his name. The first impact shook Terran for like a thunderclap. Dust and debris filled the streets as the forged soldiers stepped out of their old ships. They moved with mechanical precision, their armor reflecting the twin suns above. Each step was calculated, each movement rehearsed. Even Luma, watching from the shelter monitor, could see the difference between these humans and her husband. These were trained weapons, not people. Dan did not hesitate. He had already anticipated their moves. From the command center, he tapped into the colony defense network, rerouting the shields and adjusting turret angles. Each cannon fired with perfect timing, cutting through the attackers' advance without harming the civilians still in shelters outside. The forged soldiers paused, recalculating. One of them, taller than the others, raised a signal staff, directing the attack. Their weapons charged, plasma humming like dangerous music. Dan's hands moved across the console, entering a series of sequences only he could perform. The metal case at his side hummed faintly, absorbing energy and sending signals that confused the attacker's network. Luma held her breath as she watched. She had never seen Dan like this. The gentle engineer she knew was gone. In his place was a strategist, a commander, a human shaped by centuries of war and survival. Her heart ached, but admiration burned brighter than fear. A sudden explosion rocked the outskirts of the colony. One of the forged ships had underestimated the defense shields. Smoke rose in a black column. Don did not flinch. He tapped the console, guiding an automated drone to disable the ship's landing gears. The ship tilted and crashed into a ravine, its engines sparking wildly. The forged soldiers advanced, undeterred. They were relentless, moving like shadows in perfect formation. Dan activated hidden turrets from beneath the colony. The cannons fired in coordinated bursts, forcing the soldiers to scatter. He could hear the faint clatter of their communication devices being hacked. Every signal they sent was intercepted, twisted, and sent back to confuse them. From the shelter, Luma could only watch, her fingers clutching the railing. "Dan," she whispered, "be careful." But he did not answer. His focus was total. His mind moved faster than any human could track. In the heat of the battle, he remembered every drill, every combat exercise, every tactic he had learned in Galaxy Forge. The soldiers before him were his own creation in many ways, trained in the same methods, but without the restraint that human compassion provided. One of the attackers managed to bypass the outer shield. Dan's voice came through the colony speakers, calm but commanding. "Target the intruder. Use non-lethal containment. Do not harm civilians. Adjust trajectory to avoid residential zones." A beam of blue energy shot out from a turret, striking the intruder's armor. The attacker stumbled, but did not fall. Don adjusted the cannon angle, and a second beam forced him to the ground. Within moments, he was restrained, unable to move, his weapon neutralized. Luma exhaled slowly, relief mingling with fear. "He is still human," she said softly. But something changed. Dan turned to the console, scanning for more threats. His eyes narrowed as he spotted a signal trace. "They are communicating with an external ship," he muttered. "Someone else is directing them." The Forge soldiers had arrived with reinforcements. Another wave of older ships appeared in the sky, moving faster, sharper, with markings from the earliest days of Galaxy Forge. Dan's jaw tightened. He recognized the symbols immediately. These were not ordinary humans. These were the elite, the ones who had shaped him. "Why are they here?" Luma asked, stepping closer to the monitor. Dan's eyes did not leave the screen. "They want the core," he said quietly. "They want what I have kept hidden." Luma's mind raced. "Can you stop them?" He gave a small, confident nod. "I will do what I must." In the next hour, the battle intensified. The elite Forge soldiers moved with perfect coordination, but Dan anticipated each move. He predicted their attacks, set traps, and manipulated the environment to his advantage. He used the terrain, the shields, and even the colony's own automated systems to create zones where the attackers could not move freely. One of the Forge soldiers tried to breach the main dome. Don triggered a series of automated barriers, closing doors and sealing corridors. The soldier was trapped in a chamber with no escape. Dan spoke through the speaker, his voice calm but authoritative. "You do not need to fight. Surrender and leave peacefully." The soldier hesitated, his eyes scanning for weaknesses. Don had calculated every angle, every possibility. Within seconds, he deactivated the soldier's weapon remotely and guided him out of the dome. Without harm, Luma could not believe what she was seeing. The man she married, who always fixed broken machines and helped neighbors, was now outsmarting trained human soldiers without firing a single lethal shot. He was terrifying, brilliant, and precise. As the battle continued, Don moved through the command deck like a conductor leading an orchestra. Every movement was deliberate, every decision calculated. He coordinated drones, turrets, and repair bots, turning the colony into a fortress. The attackers' frustration grew. They had never faced a human who combined intelligence, strategy, compassion in this way. One of the elite soldiers finally broke through the defenses near the energy reactor. Dan's eyes sharpened. He activated the Forge core, connecting his neural signals to the device. Energy surged through the console, and the reactor emitted a pulse that disabled the intruder's armor systems temporarily. The soldier fell to his knees, unable to move. Luma's heart pounded. "Dan, the core," she whispered. He responded with a calm nod. "I control it. It will not harm anyone innocent." The remaining Forge soldiers tried to regroup, but Dan had already predicted their tactics. He redirected power to the turrets, used the communication network to mislead their movements, and forced them into positions where capture was inevitable. One by one, the intruders were neutralized, their ships disabled, and their weapons rendered useless. Hours passed, but the battle was far from over. Dan's energy never waned. He moved with speed and precision that seemed impossible for any human. His mind worked like a network of machines, calculating possibilities, outcomes, and strategies. Yet, he never lost his humanity. Every order he gave considered the lives of civilians, aliens, and even the attackers. Finally, the last Forge ship attempted to escape. Dan traced it through the sky and activated a satellite-based tether, slowing it down. The ship hovered, unable to move, and Dan spoke through the colony's communication system. "Leave Terran 4 immediately and never return. You are not welcome here." For a moment, silence filled the colony. Then, slowly, the ship turned and departed, leaving the horizon empty once more. The remaining soldiers on the ground were disarmed and escorted away without injury. Luma stepped out of the shelter, her legs trembling. She looked at the battlefield, at the scorched terrain, and at the precise calm in Dan's movements. She realized that the gentle human she knew had always been more than he appeared. His kindness had been a choice, his calm a shield, and his power a tool he wielded only when necessary. Don walked to her, his uniform marked with soot and scratches. His face was calm, almost tired, but his eyes held the same steady determination she had always admired. "It is over," he said simply. Luma could only nod. "You fought them all," she whispered, "and you did not kill anyone." He gave a small, almost shy smile. Peace is not the absence of power. It is the use of it wisely. The colony began to recover slowly. Repairs were made, homes rebuilt, and supplies restored. Survivors spoke of the battle in awe. Aliens who had doubted humans now looked at them with new respect. The name of Daniel Hark spread across Terran 4, not as a soldier, not as a commander, but as a symbol of human ingenuity, restraint, and strength. At night, Luma found Dan on the balcony of their home, staring at the twin moons. She approached quietly. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Regret does not help. I did what I had to do, but I am glad I could protect everyone." She took his hand in hers. "I always knew you were capable, but I never knew you were this extraordinary." Don looked at her with warmth. "I am still the man who brings you tea. That has not changed, but sometimes the world demands more." "Duh." Luma rested her head on his shoulder. The battle had ended, but the future was uncertain. The Forge soldiers would return, or others like them would. Terran 4 would need defense, wisdom, and courage. But she also knew that humanity had more than survival skills. They had heart and a choice to be kind, even when the galaxy demanded strength. That night, she understood the full meaning of what she had married. Dan was not just a gentle human. He was a protector, a strategist, a being who carried the strength of his species without losing its compassion. In the quiet of the twin moons, Luma made a silent vow. Whatever challenges came next, she would face them alongside the man who was both ordinary and extraordinary. A gentle husband and a formidable human force all in one. The calm after the battle lasted only a day. Terran 4's sky was clear, the twin suns rising over repaired domes and glimmering streets. Yet in the heart of the colony, Luma felt a tension she could not name. She had seen Dan's other side, the side trained to fight, to outsmart, to dominate. It had been awe-inspiring and terrifying. She wondered if peace would ever feel the same. Dan, however, did not rest. He moved through the colony like a quiet storm. Repair teams followed his instructions with precision. Defense turrets were upgraded, supply routes reorganized, and the new shelters reinforced. He coordinated with alien representatives, ensuring every species' safety. Yet, beneath the calm, he was watching the skies. Luma found him one evening atop the observation tower. The twin moons glowed softly, casting long shadows across the ground. He stood in silence, hands on the railing, eyes scanning for distant signals. She approached slowly. "Are you waiting for them to return?" she asked. He turned slightly, his expression unreadable. "They may come. The Forge never forgets. Those were my own people, but the program taught them to follow orders without question. Some see the core as a tool. Others see it as a weapon. I cannot allow either." Luma shivered. "You mean they will try again?" Dan's nod was slow, firm. "If they do, Terran 4 could be lost. Not just the core. Everything we rebuilt." The next morning, reports arrived from the outer sensor network. Strange vessels were moving near Terran 4's orbit. They were sleek, black, almost invisible against the backdrop of space. Don studied the readings, his eyes narrowing. "These are not simple Forge patrols," he said. "They are reconnaissance units. Someone is testing us." Luma stepped closer. "Do you plan to fight them again?" He hesitated for a moment, then answered, "If I can avoid bloodshed, yes. But I will not let them threaten civilians." By midday, the first reconnaissance ship approached. It hovered silently above the colony, scanning with advanced sensors. Don activated the core, linking it to the colony's defense grid. Energy flowed through the system, disrupting the incoming signals. The ship's scanners blinked and faltered. Inside the ship, elite Forge soldiers realized their communications were compromised. Orders from their command could not reach them. Confusion spread quickly. Don had used the core not to attack, but to control, to outthink, to outmaneuver. Luma watched, fascinated and fearful. "It is like he is one step ahead of them before they even move," she whispered. Dan's fingers danced over the console, issuing commands to drones and turrets. The core hummed softly, sending signals that confused the attacker's systems. Drones moved to block the reconnaissance ship, forcing it to retreat without a single shot fired. When the ship withdrew, Dan exhaled slowly. "This is just the beginning," he said. "They will return with more force." As night fell, he called a council meeting with the colony leaders and alien representatives. Maps and holographic displays filled the room. He explained the threat and outlined a strategy for defense. His tone was calm but commanding. Every detail, every contingency, every possible scenario was addressed. Luma watched him speak. She knew he had once been a soldier, but this was different. This was not about destruction. It was about protection, about using every skill he had learned to safeguard life. Humans were often underestimated. Now, she understood why. After the meeting, Dan walked with Luma through the quiet streets. Many buildings still bore scars from the previous battle. Children played cautiously in the repaired areas, their laughter a small victory. "You never stop," Luma said softly. "I cannot," he replied. "Peace is fragile. If I do not act, others will pay the cost." The next day, the second wave arrived. Larger ships, armed and imposing, descended toward the colony. Dan activated the defense systems. Turrets turned, shields hummed, and drones moved into position. Yet he also deployed a new tactic. Using the core, he created holographic decoys, making the attackers believe there were more defenses than reality allowed. The forged soldiers advanced cautiously. Unsure which targets were real, Dan's calculations were precise. He funneled them into areas where the drones and automated defenses could disable them without harm. One by one, the enemy units were neutralized. During the battle, Dan moved with a fluidity that amazed Luma. He climbed the command tower, rerouted power, and corrected errors in real time. His mind worked faster than any system, anticipating every move. Yet, he was not ruthless. Civilians were never at risk, and his goal was always control, not destruction. By evening, the attackers withdrew again. The colony had survived, stronger than before. Luma approached Dan as he reviewed the battle logs. "You are unstoppable," she said. He shook his head. "I am not. I am prepared." "That is the difference." Luma studied him. She had known humans were strong, but this was more than physical strength or training. It was intellect, creativity, and restraint combined. Dan had shown her a side of humanity she had never imagined. Days passed. The colony continued to rebuild. The forged soldiers did not return immediately, but the threat loomed. Dan trained local volunteers, teaching them to use tools, repair systems, and maintain defenses. He shared his knowledge without fear, fostering confidence and independence among the colonists. One evening, Luma found him at the observation tower again. The core hummed faintly in the corner of the command room, ready but unused. "Do you ever wish you had stayed away from this life?" she asked. He shook his head. "I could not. Humanity builds, repairs, protects. That is who we are. Even when we wish for peace, we must be ready for war. That is our nature. But the choice to be kind is ours." She leaned against him. "You are more than I imagined. I'm still the same man who brought you tea," he said quietly. "But now you know what I can become if the world demands it." The night passed quietly, but Luma knew the peace would not last. The Forge program had left marks on the galaxy, and humans had both the power and the burden to confront it. She also knew that no matter what came next, Dan would face it with skill, restraint, and courage. And as the twin moons rose over Terran 4, she understood fully. Humanity's greatest strength was not in their weapons or their machines. It was in their ability to choose kindness, even when their power was unmatched. Dan turned to her, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Whatever happens next, we will face it together," he said. Luma nodded. "Together," she whispered, in the silence of the colony. The core pulsed softly, a reminder of the power that lay in human hands. And far beyond Terran, for other forces watched, waiting for the next move. The galaxy had seen what humans could do when pushed, but it had yet to see the full measure of their restraint, ingenuity, and courage. Dan and Luma stood side by side, ready for whatever shadow rose next, prepared to protect not only their home, but the principle that had guided humanity. Since the first starship left Earth, to be strong yet kind, to be capable yet compassionate, to be human in every sense of the word, Terran 4 had begun to heal. Streets were cleared of debris, water flowed again, and new shelters rose from the ashes. Yet the colony still trembled under the memory of the battles. Civilians whispered about the human who had saved them. A man who seemed gentle, yet carried the strength of an entire species. Luma walked beside Dan through the reconstruction sites. He moved steadily, giving instructions, encouraging volunteers, and solving problems faster than anyone could anticipate. Yet she could see the tension in his shoulders, the small furrow in his brow. Even victories weighed heavily on him. "They will come again," he said softly. "I know," Luma replied. "But we have survived. We can survive again." Dan stopped and looked out at the horizon. Survival is not enough. We must ensure they never threaten this place again. The warning came sooner than expected. A fleet of unknown ships appeared near orbit. These ships were not Forge patrols, nor Dravix raiders. Their design was alien, angular, and dark. They had no visible markings, but emitted a signal that interfered with all human communications. Dan studied the readings, his face growing grim. "They have found us," he said, "and they know about the core." Luma's pulse quickened. "What do we do?" Dan's eyes hardened with resolve. "We fight. But carefully. We cannot risk civilians. We cannot risk the core falling into the wrong hands." Over the next hours, Terran 4 transformed once again into a fortress. Dan directed construction of new shield generators, mobile defense turrets, and sensor arrays. Civilians were evacuated to underground zones. Alien representatives were briefed on defense tactics. Every step, every action was measured, precise, efficient. When the alien fleet descended, the first skirmishes began. Their ships fired energy beams that could destroy entire domes. Dan activated the core and linked it to the colony grid. The beams were deflected, diverted, or absorbed. Drones moved to intercept boarding teams before they could touch the surface. Luma watched in awe as her husband commanded the battle. He moved from console to console, adjusting shields, directing automated fire, and predicting enemy movements. His mind worked faster than any computer. He did not just react. He anticipated. One of the alien ships attempted to breach the main energy plant. Dan's hands flew over the console. Using the core, he created a force field that trapped the ship in a containment bubble. Automated drones restrained boarding pods, capturing them without harm. The aliens struggled, confused by defenses they could not understand. Luma whispered, "It is like he can see the future." Dan did not reply. He did not need to. Every move he made was deliberate, a combination of instinct, training, and deep human ingenuity. Hours passed. The alien fleet began to falter, their attacks disorganized by the precision and control Dan exercised. He used the core not to destroy, but to disable, neutralize, and protect. Every captured ship and restrained soldier was treated with care, demonstrating that humanity's strength did not rely on cruelty. Finally, the alien commander attempted to negotiate. A communication signal appeared in the command chamber, a holographic figure addressing Dan. "You are human," it said. "You should submit. Your core is ours. Resistance is futile." Dan's response was calm and unwavering. "I am human. That is why I will protect my people, my home, and this planet. The core is a tool, not a weapon for conquest. You will leave Terran 4 and never return." The aliens hesitated. The humans' defense and precision were unlike anything they had encountered. They had underestimated the combination of intellect, strategy, and compassion. Slowly, their ships began to retreat, signaling surrender. Luma approached Dan after the battle. The colony was quiet, lights flickering softly across the rebuilt streets. "You did it," she said. "You protected everyone again." Dan looked at her, exhausted but calm. "Yes, but there will always be more challenges. The galaxy is not a safe place." She took his hand. "I know. But you have shown me what humanity truly is. We are not just survivors or builders. We are protectors. We are capable of kindness, even when the world demands strength." Dan smiled faintly. "That is the choice we make. Strength without kindness is dangerous. Kindness with strength is powerful." The next days were filled with recovery and recognition. Terran Force celebrated the humans' ingenuity and bravery. Alien representatives thanked Dan and Luma personally. Citizens whispered stories of the man who had saved them, a gentle husband who had revealed the terrifying brilliance of humanity. When necessary, Luma watched him quietly as he moved through the colony. He fixed a broken generator personally, guided children to safety during a drill, and comforted an alien family whose home had been damaged. Even after all the battles, he remained the same gentle human she had married. Yet now she understood the depth of his nature. His kindness was deliberate, his calm was trained, his courage was unmatched. One evening, they walked together on a repaired bridge overlooking the valley. The twin moons reflected in the river below, painting silver trails across the water. "Will it always be like this?" Luma asked softly. "Will humans always need to fight to protect what they love?" Dan shook his head. "Not always. But when the galaxy forgets what humanity can do, we remind it. That is our responsibility, our duty, and our choice." She smiled, finally understanding. "And you chose wisely." He took her hand in his. "I always do. But now others see what I have always known. Humanity is not weak. We are strong, and we choose how to use that strength." In the distance, a small patrol of alien ships passed quietly, leaving Terran 4 untouched. The core, safely stored, hummed faintly in the command center, a reminder of the power humans could wield when necessary. Yet the true strength was not the technology, nor the battles, nor the calculations. It was the choice to remain kind, compassionate, and humane in the face of overwhelming challenges. Luma rested her head against Dan's shoulder. "I knew you were extraordinary," she said. He looked at her with warmth. "And now the galaxy knows too." The stars shone above Terran, for like countless eyes watching the galaxy's unfolding story. Humans had proven that day that they could rise to challenges, protect life, and wield strength with wisdom. They had revealed the full measure of their potential, not just as warriors, engineers, or leaders, but as humans resilient, compassionate, and brilliant. And in that quiet night as the colony celebrated survival, Luma knew that she had married not only a kind man, but a guardian, a strategist, and a hero. A human who could be gentle and terrifyingly capable all at once. The galaxy had seen the light of Terran 4, and it would remember.